Hey guys, I'm Matthew Wolfhardt, and we're here with Analyn. She's one of my special friends and great business partners, right? Because we work on a lot of different things together, and you're an entrepreneur as well. So I really just kind of want to jump right in and just kind of talk a little bit about your journey and why do you do what you do?
So my journey normally starts when I'm born. I was born in the Philippines and I grew up basically in Virginia. So I came out here to the United States after my mom married a U.S. Air Force man who is my dad. I call him my dad because he was the soul that raised me in this life, is what I kind of realized myself too. And I went to school. I got held back in second grade. And second grade was basically the time that I needed to learn how to speak English. I needed to kind of like learn the culture of how it is to be an American, all of that good stuff. So after I learned a little bit of that, I had fun learning. So I wanted to learn everything. So no matter where I was, whether I was in art class, staying after school was like my best friend, the after school activity. So I was never really home until later. And until the computer, of course, came about. And the computer was my best friend. So I was definitely into tech, and I was like the nerd that took things apart just to see how it came together. Um, and my childhood was really good, actually. Even though my parents separated and went through a lot of their own struggles and stuff, I just kind of kept myself busy. I was very independent. I always had like maybe a few friends here and there that I go and visit or hang out at, or, like I said, stay after school. And then after high school, I went into the military. So the military was where everything kind of came together, full circle almost in a way. So I joined the military because my dad was military. He was Air Force, and he was also my soccer coach. He actually recently passed back in October, so it's been really tough emotionally at times. But I learned to kind of persevere in a sense where I find ways to kind of cope with what I have went through. And so it started when I was in the military and I was stationed in Norfolk. I had already been to Japan. I've been to San Diego. I came back into to Virginia because my family lived there, and I gave birth to my first son and then my second son in Virginia. So my first son was born in San Diego, but I wanted to be closer to family, so I ended up going back to Norfolk, being in close to the family in Virginia. And at the time, I was with their dad, and it got kind of rocky. Sometimes relationships get really rocky because there was that separation before that, and then coming back together again. It's like we didn't really know each other, which normally it starts out that way. And I feel like not knowing each other kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say made me who I am, but it kind of like made things a little shaky because I think after my second son was when I had postpartum depression, you know? And after that, I basically got into trouble because I was very, I guess I was, what's the word for it? I was not myself. I was going through a lot of internal conflicts with myself. At the time, he was very verbally abusive. He called me different names, and I've had the concern that it was going to become physical eventually.
Right.
So,
So you're kind of experiencing like some traumatic experiences that you're like, hey, you know what? I need to get out of this somehow. I
yes.
see some abusive behavior that, I'm taking on. This isn't healthy. So
Yeah.
you're kind of like, I need to kind of pivot myself,
Yeah.
right?
And that's the thing. Pivoting, sometimes it's not fun. It's very
Right.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's out of your control majority of the times.
Change can be hard.
So when that happened, it was like the universe was like, nope, he's not the one for you. Let's put you through this. And I went through a lot of hardships where I ended up losing custody of my children. He So he had the kids at the time, and I was kind of miserable for another 5 years. The icing on the cake was that I went through my trauma in the military, where possibly my mental health was not, I guess, recognized. And I drank a lot. I partied a lot to kind of like, drown myself out. And I ended up in a situation where I had a situation with one of the officers in the Navy, and it became very, very bad. Like, I literally got drunk, I got drugged, and suppressed, suppressed those emotions and those visions of what was done to me at the time. So, military sexual trauma is not a fun thing to be in. I'm currently a 70% disabled veteran because of that, and I feel like there's still that lingering hurt that's still there, and I'm working through it, and I still am, even after that so many years. But that caused a lot of issues with me because I went MIA from the military. I ended up, I don't know, I drove because driving felt very, it was very meditative for me. So I drove all the way from Virginia to LA, ended up, my car broke down in LA, and I became homeless. I slept in my car for about a year or two.
Right. So I see that, you're going through these traumatic experiences, but you're still pushing forward.
I'm still pushing
Right.
forward.
You're still pushing forward and going through these things, and realizing that there's something more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You went from the military, and then you went into this, abusive relationship. You gave birth to 2 beautiful children, but yet you're still moving forward.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What is your drive in each of these moments, and realizing like, hey, like, this is a bad situation. I need to get out of it. Let's keep moving forward. What is your drive that's move you forward?
I think what really helps me move forward is the fact that I was kind of brought up that way. My dad being a soccer coach and all, I would go out there into the field, kicking the soccer ball and stuff, and I would be afraid to get kicked in the shin, and given I have guards for my shin, right? So my dad would say, I told him, I was like, I'm afraid to get kicked in the shin and stuff, and he told me, he was like, well, even if you do get kicked in the shin, you can walk it off. So it was like, continue to keep going.
I like that.
No matter how much it hurts, keep going because it's temporary. And that's kind of how I was, I guess, in a way programmed in my environment and the people that influenced me. And so my boys are basically the same thing. It's almost like it was hereditary, because their dad was in foster homes all the time, and he went through his own traumatic experience as a child, so he had to learn how to live out on his own without anyone's help, without the nurturing of mom and dad, so he was definitely in an environment that caused him to be more survival like instincts. I think for me, I was kind of born in the same way, except I didn't have the street smarts growing up as a kid. I was more of like, hey, you do this, just don't get in trouble. So my drive really is from the experiences I had with my parents and how they keep telling me, keep moving forward, keep pushing. Even my brothers today tells me that.
Yeah. So they were a positive, influence on you on, kind of obtaining that drive.
Yeah.
To keep going.
Exactly.
And even though you get kicked in the shins, it's like, hey, we got a game to play, right?
Exactly. So the realization I got off of that, though, is the fact that, yes, moving forward is great, but how are you moving forward, right? Because I feel that the one thing that really, I feel like I'm experiencing traumatic things all the time, not in the same level as I was before, maybe in less minimal level, because I'm not stopping to slow down and think about it and, reflect before moving forward. I just kind of like move forward, and it's like I'm running away from the problem rather than going and facing it in the way I needed to. And that's why I keep running into almost the same, the same mistakes,
Right,
but
right.
different,
Right. But
right?
I like that. I really like the fact that, you're not stopping and, like, oh, I've fallen down, I'm hurt. Like, you got to keep on going, At the same time, it's kind of like, we, especially as entrepreneurs, right, we suffer from all kinds of different trauma,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, even every day, like just little things, just, from other people, from clients, whatever else.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like you bring that feeling of drive and resilience into everything that you do. It doesn't matter if it's a personal life, if it's, relationships, if it's, your job or your career. And but it's always good to really feel it before moving forward, because if you're not feeling it first and then moving forward, you're not letting that go. So you're just carrying it with you. And you're continuing to carry it. And the more you carry it, it's like you run into the same patterns over and over until you can let it go, until you realize that, oh, I have to let this go first before I can jump into something else.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's like almost like you have to let go to get to the next stage in life to move forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. So awesome. Awesome. So you move out to LA, right? So,
So I was
you're
almost
like
there for a while.
going on to a new
I
stage.
tell you what, I met the most interesting characters. I went from driving some guy that sells weed to sitting down and having it's almost like camping out with a bunch of friends at a campfire, but with homeless people. And just observing. Being the observer has always been interesting to me, because I would watch what people are doing. And I'm such an observer to a point where it's like, okay, I'm seeing this because I need to see this, because there's something I need to learn from it.
So let's repeat that for me one more time.
Yeah. So when you're observing something that's happening in your environment, you are meant to be there, kind of situation. So you are meant to be there because you are meant to meet that person. You're meant to be in this environment because there's something you need to learn from it. And that's kind of how I approach every situation now. And one of the things that I did is I engaged with one of the homeless people. And this was like the last day that I was in LA and I finally, head home. I sat down next to a lady who had a cart full of blankets, and I sat next to her. She was singing, she's having a good time. It was her day. And I sat down next to her and I was like, hey, can I ask you a question? She's like, yeah, sure, honey. Ask me anything. And I said, how is it that you live this way and you have nothing, but you're singing as if you have everything? And she's like, because I'm still alive and I got to make the best out of it. And something switched in my head. It was just like, ding, and I was like, all right, I want to go home now. And that was my realization. And I was like, okay, I get it. I have nothing, but I still have me. So in that last moment, in that last day that I was there, I was on the corner. It was like, it was a gas station corner. And some guy comes out, he's paying his gas tank or whatever. And he comes out and I'm like, sir, is it okay if I can get $5, please? I just want to get something to eat, something to drink. And he was like, yeah, sure. And he handed me a $5 bill. And I looked across the street because I don't know why I looked across the street. I looked across the street. There was a casino there. Usually people would be like, oh, no, don't spend the money on casinos. Don't go and gamble. But I went there because I had met a friend there a while back who was at the bar and they had food and stuff. And he was like, next time you come through, let me know. We'll get you some food. So I came in, bought some food, and I had $2 left. And I was like, okay, well, I'm in such a giddy mood. I might as well, whatever. I'll just put $2 in the machine, right?
Just
Video poker.
Yeah.
Which is still my favorite game, by the way. And I win not all the time, but a majority of the time.
Yeah.
So I put it in, draw, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. Then I draw again. The second draw, I hit, I think it was like 4 aces with a kicker. and it was a 25, it wasn't 25 cents. I think it was like $1, like 50 cents or something. One of those. And as soon as I hit it, it started, and I was like, whoa, and it hit $500. And I was like, oh, right. Well, lucky me. So the first thing I thought of was, I'm going to get a bus ride home. So I ended up getting a bus ride home all the way to Washington, D.C., where I called my mom, and I had her pick me up. And after that day, I went and turned myself into the base, and my ship had already left, so they had to hold me in holding and stuff, gave me a barracks room and everything, and they were basically writing me out. Yeah.
Wow. So you were homeless for how long?
About almost 2 years, so
2
like maybe a
years.
year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's almost kind of like you were kind of just, you almost lost everything so that you can gain everything back.
Yeah.
Right?
And each individual that I've met was a
Yeah.
piece of who I am that I needed to heal from. And that's how I felt, because each individual, I can tell they had their issues, they had their problems, they had their traumas. We never talked about it, but I can tell, And so after that, I ended up, coming home, and that's when everything started to come back. And I was like, oh, each one of those people that I met were like what we call reflections of who we are. Pieces of who we are, and once you kind of connect the dots and put them together, you kind of find almost your identity.
Yeah.
And that
very
was just
powerful.
on my own. I wasn't depending on anybody. I was doing everything on my own. So
you kind of just created your own type of therapy.
yes, yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
know, especially in those beginning stages, right?
Right. So then you come home to your mom, right? And so what is going through your mind at this point? What is your next step, basically?
I think my next step was basically I need to get my shit together.
Yeah.
I was like, there's definitely a lot of pieces that I need to pick up and get back into what I can do, how I can support, who I can serve. That's always been a part of my purpose, was to find a way to serve others. And you don't know that overnight. It just becomes organic in figuring that out. Because moving on, it's like you look back, you look at all the jobs you've worked, all of the people that you've engaged with, all the people you had problems with, and you kind of like putting a puzzle together, right?
Exactly. It makes you who you are. Those experiences, the people that you interacted with, and so forth. Which is kind of now what you do now, right? You help other people.
Yes.
You're the owner of WebKitty.
WebKitty Creative Services.
Yeah, which is awesome. And you create, websites for them and get them off and running with their businesses, right?
Yeah.
So you've kind of came from you started here, but now you're like here, right? So that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about that and being an entrepreneur, being a female, what is that like on your day-to-day basis? What kind of journeys are you going through as an entrepreneur?
I think as an entrepreneur, the journeys that I go through are things like, well, how much is this going to cost for me to run this business? What are some alternative ways that I can run my business where it's not costing me a lot? So when it comes to having a business, there's always that financial side of things that eats at you because you're like, where's my money going? And how am I getting more revenue? And, just kind of putting all of those pieces together. But in all sense, it's like I take everything that I've learned in my personal life, including the trauma and including all of the resilience and a lot of everything that I'm doing, and I kind of put it together. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm a great thinker. Not just a thinker, but I'm also a doer, but I like to do things that are solution-based. So I do know that my background in, web design and interactive media is I have a bachelor's in computer science. And one of the things that really interested me about going to school for that is they had a cognitive psychology class for it. And I always thought, I was like, okay, let me see what that means, and I figured it out, and I was like, well, I'm a good problem solver. It's like, no matter how many excuses you have as a business owner to say that, this would never happen, or we don't have anything in place for this. Well, you can put something in place, and that can be possible. It's just kind of having, like, getting input. Like, for example, you're a marketing person, right? And if I wanted to start a personal branding, I want to go to somebody who knows about it. I want to go to people that can give me a little bit of input and feedback, like, what can I do better, or what would be great for me, to go that route. So it's all about feedback. And we get that when we experience things too. It's just that instant feedback that we get whenever some situation happens in your life or business. You have to sit down and reflect on that and process it, because you can't make better decisions if you don't, right?
So great. Yeah. So good. So good.
So, I mean, that's all you can do. And plus, you can't do everything on your own. I've had to learn that too, because I've been exhausted many times. I've done too much work, didn't have enough time for myself. And then when you have relationships that are transformative too, like when you're getting out of a relationship, going into a relationship, it does cause problems in your career too. Right. So you have to learn how to kind of balance that work-life situation, and try to understand that even though I'm feeling like crap right now because something bad just happened, like a death in the family, or a breakup or something like that, I still have to put my foot forward in my business.
For your business.
Because everything's going to fall apart. Everything you worked hard for will.
Yeah.
So it does take a lot of discipline,
Yeah, because sometimes people think like, oh, I'm going to start my own business. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's a whole backside to that, right? Where, you do have to get up every day, and you do have to make sure that, things are moving and follow up and bills are being paid and, really pay attention to what is going on within that world, right?
Exactly.
Because you have other silos of your life, right?
Sure.
Relationships, mom, dad, boyfriend, girlfriends, all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So it is very, powerful to be an entrepreneur.
It is.
Because basically you're giving life to something, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and there's always other life that blooms from that too. There's seeds that you plant, and sometimes you never know that it's growing, but it's there. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in the relationship standpoint. So I had a friend, we went out camping. He invited a friend from, I think, Washington or whatever. And this friend, I barely knew him at the time, and we were just getting to know each other. We went out and had a bonfire in Amargosa Valley, so we would go out there and stay overnight just to watch the sunrise and everything. And we sat around a fire like, we Native Americans do it, right? We sat around a fire, we talked about stuff, had a couple of beers or whatever, and he's like, you know what, I don't have a relationship with my son, and he's already 17. And I was kind of in the moment where I was a little bit tipsy, going towards more drunk. So some of the things that I do is I channel things when I'm in a certain element of, I don't know if it's emotion, feeling, or just a certain element. Like when I'm tipsy, I say weird things, so I don't remember some of them, but I do know that it was meant for him to hear, because after he had left Vegas and went back home, it was like maybe a couple of years afterwards, and then he calls me out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey, Analyn, how's it going? It's been a while." And I was like, yeah. How's it going? And he's like, well, it's been really good. And I wanted to call you because I wanted to let you know that I have a relationship with my son now. And I was like, oh, really? I'm like, did I say something to him or whatever? And he's like, yeah. And I want to thank you for it. And I'm like, okay. And sure. And so we conversated a little bit more and stuff like that. And like I said, it's like planting those seeds, and sometimes it could be words. Sometimes it could just be a hug. an influence of some sort, right? But it did happen on the back end, and I didn't know about it until he told me. And so he said, thank you. And I don't remember what I said. I really don't. And I'm
You
like,
planted a seed.
maybe I was just channeling that.
Yeah.
And he was meant to hear it. I wasn't meant to understand what I said to him, but maybe he was just meant to hear it. Maybe it was for him. And I've actually run into situations like that when I have a really good conversation with people and we connect really well. And maybe I say something that really pertains to something's happening in their life that they never told me about. So it kind of makes me feel like I'm psychic sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, I didn't
That's
even mean to
awesome.
say that. But
Yeah. Yeah. It's good though, because, I think there's very powerful influence there, especially when you do share a connection with somebody, and I kind of want to go back to something you said before about building relationships.
Yeah.
Having those relationships, not just in life, but in business as well. Here we have, you're the owner of your own business, and you're interacting with other owners of their own businesses,
Sure.
and so creating those relationships between them is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you and I vibe really well.
Yeah.
I mean, we spitball all the time. We should do this,
Yeah.
And so, it's those relationships that help elevate everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
You
There's a saying, I don't remember where it was from, but it's kind of around the sense that, you are the people that you surround yourself.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I actually have a friend who's like, yeah, I go to these networking events all the time, and most of them are like investors, and they own lots of big companies. They're billionaires. And the first thing I always want to ask them is like, hey, ask them questions and stuff. And I'm like, I'm looking for a mentor, and that's okay. That's great. It's great to be looking for a mentor because in all essence, everyone around you is your mentor.
Oh, yeah,
because we're all learning about each other in some way, right?
Again, you're taking little things from everybody else,
Yeah.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love how it just kind of, comes full circle over and over and over again.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Tell me, to other entrepreneurs out there, people that are looking into buying a business or starting their own business or maybe already in their business, like what would be some things that have really helped you get by, owning your business?
Well, definitely have a system in place and don't do everything on your own. You think that you're a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none, right? And I have had to learn that the hard way. So, I have people doing my books. I have other people doing my prints. I have other people doing, those things. And I know how to call on them whenever I need something. But I always want to focus on what I love the most and what's within, my joy, what brings my joy is helping people build their website, especially, startups and nonprofits. They don't have any hands to hold. They're just starting out. They don't know what to do or, who do I talk to get this part of my business going and this part? Because your business is your machine and you have to keep it oiled, So all of the parts that are working together, those are your relationships with the people that are making that work. So oiling it is like, hey, calling up your friends or your business friends and be like, hey, let's go out for beer. Let's go play pool. Let's have coffee, do that in person. Like Zoom's great. I do it because I'm like far away from most people. But when I'm in town, I always want to dial in and be like, hey, let's schedule some time. Let's do it 1-1. Let's do this. Let's go bowling. Let's play golf. I played golf in heels. Well, not golf, but I played at Atomic Golf. Okay. And I played it in heels because I was going straight from work over because I was missing it out. I was like, no, I'm coming, guys. I'm there. So it was pretty cool. It was my first time ever swinging a golf club.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good. Good.
But yeah, going back on that is, being an entrepreneur is very challenging. But it's always good to have people that you can actually call and reach out to when those challenges arises, and be that person for others as well who's going through the same challenges that you've faced. but you know what to do, right? So you can give them some good advice on what they can do to kind of maneuver, all of those challenges, especially in running a business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love oiling the relationships, That's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Well,
Yeah.
good. Well, thank you so much for coming today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having
I
me.
learned a lot, and I hope everybody else has learned a lot. If they wanted to find out more about your business and what you do, where would they find you?
They can go to my website,
Okay.
webkittycreative.com.
Okay.
And if they want to chat with me and have any questions, they actually can click the chat box on the bottom right, and it goes directly to my phone.
Awesome. So awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Analyn. It was definitely a pleasure.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.